Hello and welcome to Legendary Tractors. My name is Ryan, and in today's show, I would like to share with you some John Deere tractors that were at the 2023 New York State Two-Cylinder Expo held in Canandaigua, New York. Specifically, we are going to talk about John Deere's big horses of their day, starting with the Model D and ending with the Model 830. Before we get going, I would like to ask that if you enjoyed today's show, please take the time to like, comment, and especially subscribe to my channel, as it will allow me to bring you more content like this. Be sure to check out my other videos about legendary tractors, especially the one about the John Deere models 50, 60, and 70. That video also features some of the tractors from the Expo. Now, let's get started. Just imagine what it must have been like on some sunny springtime afternoon in 1936 when this unstyled Model D was delivered to the farm. Why, I bet all the neighbors drove over just to take a look. At that point in time, the Great Depression was maybe beginning to let up a little bit. Things were looking up, so someone decided that it was time to get a new Model D for the farm. John Deere introduced the Model D in 1923 and did not quit building them until 1953. It was the longest model run of any tractor that John Deere ever built, although there were a multitude of improvements over the years. The tractor was initially offered with a 465 cubic inch engine. In 1927, it was upgraded to 501. The early unstyled versions like this one made 29.9 drawbar horsepower and about 41.6 on the belt pulley. The early versions had a 2-speed transmission. However, in 1934, a 3-speed transmission was introduced. By around 1935 or so, the steel wheels found on the earlier versions were phased out in favor of pneumatic rubber tires like this tractor has. The cost of a Model D in 1924 was $1,000. By 1936, that cost had actually dropped to $812.87, which is approximately $18,147.82 in 2024 dollars. You certainly will not find a tractor in today's market for a price that low, although when the functional work that a modern machine is capable of is factored into the equation, I would suppose the costs are probably fairly competitive. The real question would be if a tractor built in 2024 will be around nearly 100 years on from now. This beautiful 1945 Model D features improved styling introduced in 1939 that went hand in hand with the styling introduced on the A, B, and H models, which was created by Henry Dreyfuss. He was an influential 20th century industrial designer hired by John Deere. His designs are recognizable from products of the day such as Hoover vacuum cleaners, New York Central Railroad streamlined trains, Royal typewriters, Bell System telephones, and Honeywell thermostats, among many, many others. Additionally, he would eventually design the sheet metal for John Deere's new generation 10 series tractors nearly 20 years later, ushering in the age of the muscle tractor. By the time that this tractor was produced, the horsepower had increased a little bit to 38 drawbar horsepower, but was still about the same on the belt at 42. Another improvement is the electric starter. Borrowing a euphemism from modern times, this certainly made this tractor much more user-friendly, as cranking over a 501 cubic inch engine by hand took some brawn. Additionally, the electric lights made working later into the night an option when a farmer was pressed for time to get his crop in the ground. There were a total of 55,929 Model Ds built. All were manufactured at the John Deere factory in Waterloo, Iowa. The tractor pictured here was priced at $1,431.91 in 1945, which is $24,686.61 in 2024. I would like to think that maybe this tractor was purchased in 1945 because World War II was winding down and there was a son or maybe even sons coming home. Dad could see that the farm was going to expand, so he bought a welcome home present for his favorite GIs. Tell me in the comments if you think that's a plausible story. This original looking 1950 Model R looks pretty good in its work clothes. The Model R was introduced by John Deere in 1949 and was produced through 1954, which in theory made it a complementary machine to the Model D, as the D entered production in 1953. The reality is that the Model R was more of a successor to the Model D in many respects. Horsepower-wise, the R was perhaps a slightly smaller machine than the D, as the R was rated at 35 horsepower on the drawbar and 43 on the belt, while the D measured in at 38 on the drawbar and 42 on the belt. Both would sail right along with a 3 or 4 bottom plow without too much trouble. The real difference was in fuel type. The R was John Deere's first diesel-powered tractor, and this is where it really outshined the D. The D at full power ran at about 10 horsepower hours per gallon of fuel usage, and the R was at about 18. This means that the R was nearly twice as fuel efficient as the D. It really didn't take long for the R to catch on with farmers. Up until the introduction of the R, the Model D was selling at about 3,000 units per year. That fell to about 1,500 once the R came on the scene. In addition to the 415 cubic inch engine, which was equipped with a 2-cylinder pony motor to start the main motor, the R has some other really nice features as well, such as a 5-speed transmission and live PTO, which meant that the operator could stop the tractor and the power takeoff would continue to run because the PTO had its own separate clutch. This was another first for John Deere. The 1950 Model R pictured here would have set you back $3,270.07 when it was new. This is about $42,107.38 today. This is a great looking 1956 Model 80. Introduced in 1955, the Model 80 was an improvement over the Model R. Engine displacement was increased from 415 cubic inches to 470, which resulted in a horsepower increase to 60.3 on the drawbar and 65 horsepower on the belt pulley. The unit received an upgraded pony motor as well, as the one on the R was a 2-cylinder model and the 80s was a 4-cylinder. The tractor was also blessed with a 6-speed transmission, which allowed for better matching of ground speeds to whatever task was at hand. Manual steering was still standard, but power steering was an option, which the tractor that we are looking at today does have, according to the decal on the hood. Of the tractors that we are looking at today, the Model 80 is likely the rarest, as only 3,485 were built during the 1955 and 1956 model years. What a fantabulous looking John Deere Model 820. Built between 1956 and 1958, the early 820s were basically the same as the Model 80 with some cosmetic changes, such as larger rear fenders and additional yellow paint. In 1957, changes were made for the 1958 model year, in which the horsepower was increased to 67 on the drawbar and 72 on the belt. Manual steering was still standard, but I bet that most farmers opted for the power steering option by this point in the game. This tractor weighed in at 8,600 pounds, but could be ballasted up to 12,000 in order to get the power stuck to the ground. Can you imagine what it was like to be a young man in the late 50s and having one of the 7,080 Model 820s that were built on your farm? The sound of the engine, pop, 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 as it pulled a plow or a disc harrow along tilling up the ground. Pretty exciting stuff right there. Other than the sheet metal, which as you can see in this picture, really made this tractor look sharp, the Model 830 was pretty much the same tractor as the 820. It still had a 470 cubic inch engine making 67 drawbar horsepower and 72 on the belt. It still featured the 6-speed transmission that was introduced with the Model 80 and the independent 540 RPM PTO, which began all the way back with the Model R. Power steering had now become standard. The gasoline-powered pony motor was still standard, but 24-volt electric start was now an option. All the tractors discussed today, starting all the way back with the Model D, were built at the Waterloo, Iowa John Deere plant. While this was still true with the Model 830, some were built in Monterrey, Mexico as well. Built between 1958 and 1961, John Deere produced 6,715 Model 830 tractors. At that point, it was the end of the line for the big two-cylinder workhorses, which had a nearly 40-year run starting with the Model D. These tractors have been transformational for agriculture, allowing farmers to mechanize from animal power. The era of the muscle tractor was about to begin with the introduction of the new generation tractors. The 5010 was coming, and it would offer farmers performance that was simply in a whole new class of tractor that the 830 really couldn't even be compared to. I hope that you've enjoyed this discussion about John Deere's big workhorses. If you have a good story about a two-cylinder John Deere, tell me all about it in the comments. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time when we discuss some more legendary tractors.